I wasn't supposed to be home that day. That thought kept looping in my mind as my car rolled to a stop in front of my house. A place that suddenly didn't feel familiar at all. The driveway light was on, even though I distinctly remembered turning it off before leaving for my work trip. A curtain shifted in the front window, as if someone had been watching for me. And the air felt wrong, like the kind of quiet that hides something. I stepped out slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes sounding louder than usual. My neighborhood wasn't the kind of place where things happened. It was calm, predictable, almost boring. We had an HOA that loved rules more than people, and a woman who treated herself as its president even when she wasn't. Our very own HOA Karen. She had a reputation for inserting herself into everyone's business, filing complaints about things like mailbox angles and grass length. Harmless, annoying, but not dangerous. At least I thought so. The moment I reached for my keys, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Police notified. Possible unauthorized activity at your home. Before I could even process what that meant, a patrol car turned the corner, its lights flashing in that eerie blue and red glow that instantly makes your chest tighten. And there she was, Karen, standing on my porch, arms crossed, looking almost triumphant. I walked toward her, confused and irritated. "Why did you call the police?" She didn't answer the question. Instead, she launched into a dramatic explanation about how she saw someone sneaking around my house, how she feared for community safety, how she was only protecting the neighborhood. But something in her eyes didn't match her words. There was a flicker of panic, like she wasn't expecting me to show up. Not today, not this soon. The officer approached me politely, asked for ID, and made it clear he had to check the property, standard procedure. I agreed. After all, if someone had broken in, I wanted to know. But a strange chill crawled up my spine as I followed him inside. Karen tried to slip in behind us, but the officer stopped her. Her forced smile cracked for just a second. The house smelled lived in. Too lived in for someone who'd been gone a week. A mug in the sink that wasn't mine. A blanket thrown over the couch that didn't belong to me. And then the officer paused at the hallway, shining his flashlight toward the guest room I rarely used. He stepped inside. I waited. Seconds passed. Then he quietly called my name. I walked toward him, and the moment I saw his face, I knew something was very wrong. His expression wasn't confused, it was heavy, troubled, like he had just uncovered something that shouldn't have been possible. Behind him, on the edge of the bed, sat a neatly folded stack of clothes I didn't recognize. Next to it, a half-empty water bottle. And on the floor, a purse. Not mine. Not anyone I knew. The officer turned back to me. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Someone's been living here, and it's not who you think." He didn't finish the sentence, because in the doorway a shadow moved. The shadow in the doorway didn't step forward, and for a moment the house felt too small, too quiet, as if it was holding its breath along with me. I could hear my own heartbeat over the faint hum of the air conditioner. The officer raised a hand, signaling me to stay where I was. His flashlight beam tightened, tracing the outline of the doorframe like he was revealing a crime scene 1 inch at a time. But whoever, or whatever, stood there slipped back out of sight before either of us could see a face. I swallowed hard. I'd lived alone for years, ever since my breakup. One of those endings that leaves behind long shadows and empty rooms. My guest room had always been a place I avoided. Too many old memories. Too much silence. But now, that silence had been filled by someone else's life, someone else's presence. And the strangest part was how comfortable everything looked. Not like a chaotic break-in. Not like a panicked intruder. More like someone had been settling in, making themselves at home. The officer took a slow step forward. I stayed still, my mind racing, replaying the last week. I'd left town for a work trip, a rare chance to get away from the draining routine of HOA complaints, emails, and the constant nagging requests from Karen about mandatory updates or community regulations. She'd shown up at my door more times than I could count, usually to scold me for something trivial. A trash bin slightly out of place. A porch light bulb that was too bright. Once, She even claimed a leaf blower violated noise guidelines at 3 p.m. But this time felt different. Her behavior tonight didn't match her usual nagging confidence. When I arrived, she looked startled, almost terrified, like I'd interrupted something she didn't want me to see. And that strange text from an unknown number still burned in my mind. Who sent it? How did they know I wasn't home? How did they know someone was inside? As the officer examined the room, his flashlight lingered on details that made my chest tighten. Shoes placed neatly by the wall, a phone charger plugged into the outlet, a pillow with a visible indentation. Someone had slept here, recently, comfortably. I stepped forward despite the officer's warning, my voice tight. How long do you think someone's been here? He didn't look at me when he answered. Longer than a day or two. His beam swept across the closet, where hangers shifted slightly from the movement of the door. Maybe weeks. Weeks. The word hit me like a punch. Before I could process it, there was a soft creak from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable click of the front door closing. The officer spun around, rushing toward the sound. I followed him, confusion boiling into panic. In the living room, Karen stood frozen, eyes wide, hands still on the doorknob as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. I thought you needed help, she stammered, stepping back. But her trembling voice wasn't what caught my attention. Behind her, sitting by the entryway, was a suitcase. The same suitcase I'd seen missing from my storage closet 3 weeks ago. For a moment, no one moved. The suitcase sat there like proof the house had been telling the truth long before I arrived. My missing suitcase, one I thought I'd misplaced, maybe loaned out, maybe stored somewhere I'd forgotten, was right in front of me, clean, unlocked, and definitely used. The officer stepped toward it cautiously, but my eyes stayed locked on Karen. Her face told 2 stories at once, one trying to look shocked, and one trying to hide the fact that she wasn't. She kept her arms tight against her sides, like she wanted to shield herself from whatever was coming. When did you get this? The officer asked her without looking away from the suitcase. I don't know, she stuttered. I just walked in to check. I thought maybe I could help. But the problem was, Karen never helped. Not neighbors, not the HOA board, not even the mailman who once asked to leave packages at her door. She wasn't the helpful type. She was the authoritative type, the type who wanted control. And suddenly I began to wonder, what exactly had she been trying to control? The officer noticed my stare and motioned for me to stay calm. But how could I? My home had become a stage for secrets I didn't understand, and the main actress was standing right in front of me, trembling for the first time since I'd known her. A second subplot began forming in my mind, one that made the situation even stranger. Over the past month, Karen had been unusually quiet. Fewer complaints.
Fewer surprise visites.
Fewer passive-aggressive notes taped to doors. It was almost peaceful. I'd assumed she was simply easing up, maybe busy with something else. But what if the something else was inside my house? The officer bent down, inspecting the suitcase contents. Clothes I hadn't worn in years. Old notebooks. A sweater I'd lost. Things someone would use if they were trying not to draw attention. Things someone would choose if they wanted to stay under the radar. Has anyone else had access to your home? He asked. I hesitated, and that hesitation said more than words could. The truth was I had made mistakes, small ones that now felt massive. I'd kept a spare key under a loose stone by the porch. Lazy, careless, convenient, and I'd once told Karen about it, back when we weren't at war over paint samples and mailbox heights. Back when she pretended to be friendly. A cold realization crept over me. Did she remember? Before I could speak, a soft vibration echoed. Someone's phone buzzing on a hard surface. It wasn't mine. Karen's hands were empty. The officer checked his pockets. The sound came again, this time from deeper inside the house. The officer exchanged a tense glance with me and stepped toward the hallway. Karen stayed frozen, too frozen. Whose phone is that? I asked her. She blinked rapidly, swallowing hard. I don't know. She lied. I felt it. The officer followed the sound until it led him to a partially opened cabinet in the dining room. He reached for the handle, his movements deliberate. Karen took a sudden step forward. "Don't!" she blurted out. Her voice cracked. The house fell silent again, full of the answer she had just accidentally given. But the officer kept going, ignoring her plea. He opened the cabinet, and his face changed instantly. Shock, recognition, and something else that made every hair on my arms stand up. There was something inside. Something, or someone. But we still couldn't see who. The officer's flashlight froze on whatever was inside the cabinet, but he didn't speak. His silence felt heavier than any words could have. I moved a step closer, trying to see what he was seeing, but he raised a hand sharply, ordering me back. Not angrily, but with a seriousness that made my stomach twist. Whatever was in there wasn't just surprising. It was dangerous, or deeply wrong. Karen stood behind us, gripping the edge of the wall like she needed it to stay upright. Her breathing had changed. Shallow, rapid, almost panicked. She wasn't pretending anymore, and with every second she stayed silent, the truth crawled closer. The officer slowly kneeled, shining the light deeper into the cabinet. Something inside shifted. Not loudly, just a tiny movement, like fabric brushing wood, or someone adjusting their posture after being cramped too long. A living sound, a human sound. My mind raced through every impossible scenario. A stranger, a runaway, a squatter, but none of those felt right. Not with Karen here, shaking like she was watching her world collapse. "Ma'am," the officer said tightly, not looking at her. "Step away from the doorway." Karen didn't move. "Now," he commanded. She stumbled back, hands raised, as if she were surrendering to a truth she'd been holding together with strings. The officer inched the cabinet door wider. I felt heat rising in my face, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every instinct in me screamed to look, to understand, to finally see what had been living under my roof. But all I could see was a sliver of darkness, and the shape of something tucked against the back wall. "Is it a person?" I whispered. The officer didn't answer. He didn't need to. What he did next said it all. He dropped his voice and spoke into his radio, requesting backup. Quietly, carefully, like he didn't want the person or Karen to hear the full message. He asked for a second unit. Then a code for potential concealed individual. Karen's hands flew to her face. "Please," she choked out. "Don't make a scene." The officer stiffened. "A scene? Someone has been inside this home for weeks, and you knew?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she blurted, then stopped herself, biting her lip hard, as if she'd revealed more than she intended. My head snapped toward her. Go this far? What went this far? She stared at me, eyes glistening, like she wanted to speak, but was terrified of what would happen if she did. She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. The officer stood up, tension radiating from him. "Sir, I need you to step outside with me." But before we could take a single step, a soft sound came from inside the cabinet, gentle, shaky, unmistakably human. A quiet voice, someone whispering. The officer froze. Karen's breath caught, and I felt a chill crawl all the way down my spine. The whisper came again, this time clearer. Is she gone?" The officer tightened his grip on his flashlight and slowly reached toward the cabinet door again. But before he could open it fully, Karen lunged forward. Not toward him, but toward the cabinet itself. "Stop!" she cried, desperation cracking her voice. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't trying to hide from the truth. She was trying to protect something, or someone. But who? And why? In my house. Karen's sudden lunge wasn't graceful. It wasn't calculated. It was raw, desperate instinct, the kind that only comes from someone who knows they're seconds away from losing everything. The officer reacted instantly, blocking her with one arm while pulling her back with controlled force. She cried out, not in pain but in panic, her voice cracking in a way I had never heard from her before. "You don't understand," she shouted. "She's scared. Please, don't frighten her. The word hit me like icy water. The officer froze. I froze. Even the whisper inside the cabinet went silent. He turned sharply toward Karen. Who is she? Karen's face crumpled, shame and fear folding her features into something almost unrecognizable. Just let me explain. Please, just give me 1 second to explain before you open that door. But the officer wasn't moving. His jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening. He had already heard enough to know this situation wasn't simple trespassing. Something bigger, much bigger, was happening here. Something personal. He slowly opened the cabinet door the rest of the way. First, I thought it was empty. Then the beam of his flashlight shifted, and there she was, curled in the far corner, clutching her knees to her chest. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, pale, exhausted, eyes red from crying. Her clothes were clean but worn. Her hair was tied back in a clumsy knot. She steadied her breathing only when she saw Karen. And to my shock, Karen's entire expression changed. The cold, controlling HOA enforcer I'd known for years disappeared. In her place was someone terrified and protective. She's my daughter, Karen whispered, voice trembling. My real daughter. The one no one knows about. The room felt like it tilted. Karen never talked about children. She always seemed alone, emotionally, physically, even socially. A lone wolf fueled by neighborhood rules and personal pride. But now, seeing her like this, fragile and cornered, something didn't add up. The officer swallowed hard. Ma'am, why is your daughter hiding in his house? Karen shut her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. Because I didn't know where else to take her. Before the officer could ask more, the girl spoke. Soft, apologetic, shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't want to stay here. She said it was temporary. Temporary. 3 weeks. Rent-free. In my locked house. The betrayal stung sharp and deep. Karen looked at me finally, pleading. She had nowhere to go. She got into trouble I couldn't fix. If the HOA found out, if the police found out, her whole life would collapse. I was desperate. You travel so much. You thought you could break into my house? I snapped, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. You thought you could hide your daughter here like it was some kind of storage unit? Karen broke down completely, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just needed time to figure things out. The officer stepped between us. Everyone needs to calm down. This doesn't look like a simple trespass case anymore. He turned back to the girl. What kind of trouble are we talking about? But before she could answer, a loud knock rattled the front door. Sharp, authoritative, unmistakably official. The officer's eyes widened. Karen's face drained of color. And the girl's voice trembled as she whispered, "They found me." The knock came again, louder this time, shaking the doorframe. The officer instinctively shifted his stance, one hand near his radio, the other subtly motioning for me to stay back. Karen gripped the wall like it was the only thing holding her upright. Her daughter curled deeper into herself, shoulders trembling, eyes fixed on the floor as if the sound alone could shatter her. The officer approached the door cautiously, peering through the small window beside it. His jaw tightened. "It's not one of ours," he murmured. Karen let out a small, broken sound, half sob, half plea. "Please, don't let them take her. They'll ruin her life. They'll ruin everything." "Who is it?" I asked. But it wasn't the officer who answered. "It's the people I ran from," the girl whispered. Her voice cracked as she lifted her head. "The ones who hurt me." The officer shot her a sharp look. "You said you got into trouble. What kind of trouble?" She swallowed hard. "Not legal trouble. People trouble. Someone I trusted. Someone who wouldn't let me leave after I found out what they were doing. Mom hid me because they said they'd come for me." Another knock, this time accompanied by a voice. A man's voice. "Open the door." "Hoa inspetin." Mandatory. My stomach dropped. Not police. Not random strangers. Hoa. And suddenly, every odd detail of the past few months snapped into place. Karen's sudden silence, her panic tonight, her insistence on being here before anyone else. She hadn't been hiding her daughter from the law. She'd been hiding her from someone inside the very HOA she pretended to control. The officer whispered urgently, "We don't know who's out there. Don't say a word." He reached for his gun, not drawing it fully but ready. The man outside tried the handle, rattled it. Harder. "Karen?" he called, voice slicing through the house. "I know you're in there. We need to talk about your situation." Karen flinched like she'd been struck. That was all the confirmation the officer needed. He stepped toward the door, cracked it open just enough to show his badge, but not enough to expose the girl. The man outside, a tall, sharp-jawed HOA board member I'd seen only twice, jerked back in surprise. "Oh, officer, I didn't realize." "You need to leave," the officer said firmly. "But there's a matter. This is an active police matter. Step away." Even from inside, I could hear the shift in the man's tone. Fearful, calculating, not innocent. He backed away slowly, eyes flicking toward the house like he was memorizing every detail. Then he disappeared into the darkness. The officer shut the door, locked it, and exhaled. For the first time all night, silence felt like safety. Karen collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I didn't know who else to trust. They watched everything I did. Every door. Every house. I knew you traveled. I knew your place was empty. I just wanted to keep her hidden until they gave up. Her daughter reached out weakly. "Mom, we can't hide forever." The officer crouched in front of her, voice steady. "You don't have to. If someone threatened you, we can protect you. But you need to tell us everything." And she did. Names. Patterns.
Moments.
The things she overheard. The reason she fled. It wasn't just HOA nonsense. It was blackmail. Extortion. A secret committee inside the board using community enforcement to control homeowners and her. The officer called for backup again. Real backup. And within minutes, flashing lights illuminated the street. I watched Karen's daughter walk out with the officers, trembling but no longer hiding. Karen followed, broken but relieved. The officers assured me they'd handle the break-in situation separately, but after everything, pressing charges felt wrong. She had trespassed, yes, but out of fear, not malice. My house was mine again, but the truth changed it. As I finally closed the door behind the last officer, I noticed something on the floor. Something small, barely visible. A key. My spare key. But it wasn't where I had left it. It was inside, near the living room rug. And for the first time, I realized the daughter wasn't the only one who'd been in my house. Someone else had used the key. Someone who hadn't shown themselves. Someone who hadn't knocked. And they hadn't been found yet. The morning after everything unfolded felt strangely quiet. Almost too quiet for a neighborhood that had spent weeks tangled in secrecy, tension, and fear. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the early sunlight spill across the street. The police cars were gone. The chaos had settled. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like the neighborhood could breathe again. Karen's illegal stay, the forged documents, the manipulation of the HOA board. Everything had finally been dragged into the light. Some neighbors were still shocked. Others were angry. A few avoided eye contact entirely, embarrassed they had supported her without knowing the truth. But beneath all of that, there was a sense of something else too. Relief. The kind of relief that comes when a storm finally ends and you realize the roof somehow held on. I walked to the mailbox, passing the house she'd been secretly occupying. Yellow police tape still fluttered across the doorway like a warning flag from the universe itself. For weeks, that place had been a symbol of someone else's control. Now, it was proof that control had limits, that even the loudest bully couldn't hide behind authority forever. Inside my mailbox was a small stack of envelopes, bills, flyers, and one letter with no return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky but sincere. "I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I just didn't want to lose everything. K." For a moment, I just stared at it. Not angry, not satisfied, just thoughtful. People do terrible things for reasons we don't always understand. But consequences don't disappear just because someone regrets them later. Still, something in that simple apology brought an unexpected calm. Because closure rarely comes from punishment alone. Sometimes it comes from understanding what pushed someone to that edge in the first place. Later that afternoon, a few neighbors gathered outside to clean up the community notice board Karen had vandalized weeks earlier. Someone handed me a paint roller. Another brought fresh flowers to replace the dead ones Karen had thrown out during one of her outbursts. As we worked, someone joked, "Feels like we're rebooting the neighborhood." Maybe we were. By evening, the street looked different. Not physically, no dramatic landscaping changes or new paint, but emotionally. Softer, lighter, as if the place had finally exhaled. I stood at my porch again, watching kids ride their bikes, hearing someone grill in the backyard, smelling fresh-cut grass drifting on the breeze. Ordinary things, but after everything we'd been through, they felt extraordinary. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold, I realized something important. Sometimes we think the people around us change our lives by force, but the truth is, it's the choices we make during the chaos that define who we become. This whole incident taught me one unforgettable lesson. Peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the strength to face them without losing yourself. If you've followed the story till now, thank you, truly. Your time, your attention, your support. It means more than you think. And if you want more real-life stories, more twists, more lessons, and more moments like this, backhand index pointing right, make sure to like the video. Backhand index pointing right, share it with someone who loves intense stories. Backhand index pointing right and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.